Matt Conant. Nicholas McKelly.
Here.
Bruce Johnson.
Here.
Bill Conley.
Here.
Todd Kimmelshoe.
Here.
Bo Shepherd.
Yeah.
Mark Bubengarten.
Here.
Wade Kirchner.
Here.
Charlie Hoppin.
Here.
Drew Stresser. Lackfear Gog.
Yes.
Mike Morris.
Here.
Krish Smittle.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm surprised you can find it.
Moving on. Members of the public will be allowed to address the Sutter Butte Flood Control Agency Board of Directors on items of interest to the public that are within the subject matter jurisdiction of the board. Any member of the audience who may wish to bring a matter before the board has not been placed on the agenda may do so at this time. However, state law prohibits that no action may be taken on any item not appearing on the posted agenda. Consent calendar. Is there any public comment? Seeing none, moving on.
Motion to approve the consent calendar.
You don't want me to read that little part first?
No.
Okay, we're moving on. I guess we'll do the consent calendar. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second. Motion and second. Items 1 and 2. All in favor? Do you want to do a roll call or?
Comment on that too.
Okay. Okay, so is there any public comment on it? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Present discussion of action items. Number 3, information update on Sutter Butte Flood Control Risk Reduction Project transfer of federal credits.
Okay, good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. Michael Bassett here. So this is a informational item to the board on the federal credit process. So I wanted to inform the board on the perfection of credits, how we're handling that process with the Army Corps and some of the timelines involved. There's a lot of different moving parts there, so I wanted the board to have an understanding of that process. So that's one thing, perfection of credits. The other item is the sale of those credits. So we're not going to get into a lot of details on that aspect, but I'll talk about some next steps and timing and what the process is as we move forward on that. So next slide, please. So I know this slide's a little busy, but there's a lot of information here. So first bullet is essentially the legal authority that the Corps has to approve a comprehensive plan submitted by a non-federal sponsor. So Sbfca and the state of California are the non-federal sponsors for the Sutter Basin project. And we've coordinated with the state to produce that comprehensive plan. And we have submitted that to the Corps, and it's under review, and I'll talk about the timing of that. The Sutter Basin project, the next bullet is the state and Sbfca essentially completed the construction of that project except for approximately 5 miles that the Army Corps has completed between Star Bend and Cypress. So we have a lot of federal credit built up. So the Corps they didn't cost share in all of the work that we did previously. So this is the process to bring that up to date and get a federal credit perfected and then be able to utilize that credit. So like I said, we've completed the comprehensive plan. Basically what that does is it outlines the costs that have been expended to date and the plan on how to transfer those costs or transfer those credits to another project. So the state Department of Water Resources, they want to transfer their credit to the San Joaquin project, that they're also a non-federal sponsor involved in that project. So we'll talk about numbers, but the state has approximately 80 some odd million that they want to transfer, and we have the remainder. The second to last bullet talks about we were legally required to go after this federal credit as part of our state funding agreement. So, you know, the state has cost shared in the work that we've done to perfect these credits. And then the last bullet is right now we're looking to sell our credits to the San Joaquin Area Flood Control Agency. Next slide, please. So here's where I highlight the costs that we've calculated as these are all the expended costs for building out the Feather River West Levee project, the portions that are included in the Sutter Basin project. We have some new board members involved here, but some of the portions of the Butte County work were removed from the federally authorized project in order for us to compete and get federal funding, federal appropriations for the project. So we had to remove a portion of the project to do that in order to have a high benefit cost ratio. Back in, I think it was 2014, you know, the competition was stiff throughout the nation to compete for federal dollars, and that was the deal that was struck at that time. So as you can see from the costs that are highlighted there, there's approximately $110 million in credit, and the state cost share of that is about 74%. So they're looking at $81.6 million in credit, and Sbfca has $28.9 million in credit. So that's the numbers that we've submitted to the Corps, and those numbers they may fluctuate a little bit as part of the Corps' review and approval process. Next slide, please.
Michael, before you go on, I should know this, and I'll admit that I don't. Is the state's portion of that, did those credits come from exactly the same source as ours, or did they come through a different mechanism?
No, the state used Prop 1E money mostly for our project, so that's.
So the Corps didn't have anything to do with their excess?
No, the Corps didn't they didn't spend a dime on our project up until it was federally authorized, and then they're building out that 5 Mile project. So the state and the locals, Sbfca, cost shared entirely on building out the Feather River West Levee project.
So the state's credits are left over from Prop 1 is what you're saying?
Well, that was their funding source. Our funding source was our assessment district.
No, but the credits they're trying to sell came from a different source than ours did, is what you're saying?
Their revenue source came from a different, their revenue source was Prop 1E money.
That's what I asked, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Sure.
So, and we're gonna sell these at San Joaquin, and I think I remember you saying obviously to be at a discount. Do we have an idea of what kind of discount it would be at?
Yeah, but we're not going to talk, we can't talk about that here in this public setting. Yeah, so we're not going to talk about the sale of the credit. I just wanted to talk about the perfection of the credit and the process to sell that credit. So we can't talk about the valuation. Yeah, I should have made that more clear at the beginning, sorry.
You're pushing the envelope.
Yeah,
I guess so.
right.
I'll let you
Next slide, please. Okay.
start getting upset with me.
So this is the last slide for this. These are the key milestones that I want the board to understand, and all the mechanisms that need to take place to perfect the credit, get it approved by the Corps, and then be able to sell that credit. So Sbfca and Sbfca, we're in discussions right now. We've already approved a memorandum of agreement. No, we approved a memorandum of understanding that we were going to work together to come up with a sale of those credits. So we're going to set up a series of negotiations starting probably early next month with several board members from Sbfca and their executive director and whomever else he has there. We have our 2 board members, Charlie Hoppin and Todd Kimmelshoe, who are going to sit in on that meeting with me and Rick Reinhardt. So the 4 of us will attend those negotiation meetings. We'll look to start that in early April. with the idea of if hoping to come up with some form of agreement on a cost share that's acceptable to both sides in either May or June of this month. So what we agree upon has to come back to this board for approval. So, you know, what we agree upon in a private meeting, private setting, won't be approved until both this board and the Sbfca board approve it. So I just wanted the full board to understand that you know, we're going to negotiate as best we can, and then we'll bring back the deal that we recommend to the board at a later date, hopefully in June. Sbfca, they're going out with a Prop 218 election, and they're going to start that process soon if they haven't started already, with the idea of getting a vote completed this summer. So they're a Prop 218 election on benefiting properties of their project, calculating how much those properties would pay in. So forming an assessment district, just like Sbfca had done back in 2010. The next item is the approval of integral determination report. It's the IDR. So the division office of the Corps has to approve that IDR, and what that is they evaluate the project that we've constructed and determine, was it integral to the federally authorized project? So essentially, would the Corps have built slurry cutoff walls, you know, in as long as we did, or would they have done something different? And they determine what we built and compare it to the federally authorized project, and they come up with the integral determination. Essentially, the federal project was the Feather River West Levee project, so it's not going to change. You know, Sbfca was fully vested in producing the federal project, so we incorporated the elements of the Feather River West Levee project into that. Let me stop there and see if there's any questions, because that's a little confusing. It could be confusing.
Any questions for Michael?
Makes absolutely no sense, government. I have a question. What's the advantage of selling our credit to this entity?
So we cannot use our credits in our basin. So because the federal project is already constructed, those are stranded credits. We can't use them. Yeah.
The chair, Mike. So the way I understand this, they're doing this extra study because they want to, more or less?
They have to. So they have to determine what was built and compare that to the federally authorized project and see if it differs in any meaningful way.
They're a little late, though, aren't they?
Well, no, I mean, they're fine. Well, they are late. So that's why we went ahead and built the project, you know, way in advance of when the Corps authorized the project, or else we would have been sitting around waiting for our levee improvements.
Okay. All right.
For 5, 6, 7 years.
Okay.
You know?
Thank you, Mike.
Yeah.
Is there any other question for Michael?
Yes, through the chair, and you may be covering this in a bit. So we're going to get a portion when some revenue when we sell these funds. Are those restricted in any way, or what are you going to do with those funds?
No, well, I mean, the board would decide what to do with those funds. Implement the strategic plan would be my recommendation. So we would use those for flood risk reduction projects.
Okay, sorry, rookie question.
Most notably, probably the Sutter bypass repair, continue repairs along the Sutter bypass. Just keep in mind, the Sutter bypass wasn't part of the Corps' federally authorized project. They didn't determine that levee repair should be included in their project, because they determined that if there was failures along the Sutter bypass, it would only be to the southern portion of our basin. Therefore, it didn't calculate out to rise to the level of federal interest. That's why the bypass was not included in the Corps' project. It's included in ours, but not theirs.
Any other questions for Michael? I just have, actually, now I have two. I only had one. What is involved in getting these federal credits? How long a time frame will it take to get them granted? And how much of a project is that? And then the last question is, did the fact that the bypass is a state levy, did that have any impact on the federal Corps not wanting to address it?
No, not at all. So that not for the Sutter bypass. I am going through the dates. So these are the key milestones and dates right here on this slide.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
I'll talk about that. Yeah. Let me just continue on with the bullets here. So the IDR is estimated to be completed and approved by September of this year. The approval of the comprehensive plan will come right after, so in November of this year. The Corps is also looking at, the next bullet is the approval of the lands, easements, rights-of-way, relocations. So what we call the LERDs. The LERDs are supplied by the non-federal sponsor. So we had to go out and purchase all the real estate rights, do all the relocations of PG&E facilities, pipes, encroachments, things like that, acquire any easements. That was all, a federal project requires the non-federal sponsors to perform that work and pay for that work. But they're still reviewing it because it's part of the credit perfection process. So final accounting, that I probably should have moved that bullet up a little bit, but that's when the Corps will finally look at all the costs that we've spent to date on our project within the federally authorized project, and determine what those costs were eligible and what the credit is. So that's the process we're going through right now with the Corps. So we've been submitting credit packages from, I think in 2021 is when we started submitting our packages. The last package was submitted late last year. So all of those packages are under review, and we continue to coordinate with the Corps every month in our project delivery team meetings. Okay, so the next bullet, execute a transfer agreement between Sbfca and Sbfca. So assuming we strike a deal and both boards approve that deal, that would flow into the memorandum of agreement. So we would have that document executed, and then we would work to finalize our transfer agreement, and we're targeting January of next year, and that just gives Sbfca time to go through their Prop 218 process, work through their bonding process. So all of that information will be factored into the transfer agreement, and also the timing of when payments would be made by Sbfca to Sbfca. We also have to execute a project partnership agreement. That's between ourselves, DWR, and the Corps. And the Corps has already drafted it's called the PPA. They've already drafted the PPA amendment. They have not shared it with us yet. We should be seeing that very soon. And then once the other federal processes are completed, those will be incorporated into the PPA, and that's why it's further out into next year. We're targeting May of next year. Sbfca bonding agreement. So once Sbfca, hopefully they have a successful Prop 218 election, they complete their first assessment receivables, then they'll be able to go out and bond against that assessment district and get cash. Just like we did when we completed our assessment district, we did 2 bond issuances, one in 2013, one in 2015. That's what we used to cash flow the Feather River West Levee project. So that's when Sbfca would have the means to pay Sbfca for the credits. And then the last bullet is begin payments to Sbfca. So we anticipate if everything goes well and stays on schedule, a first payment could potentially arrive in summer of next year. So that's the schedule we're going through. Those are all the major milestones that we're working on. The state is a real beneficial partner in this process because they're having a lot more face-to-face meetings with the Corps than we, Sbfca or Sbfca are. So they're helping, we're all teaming together to move this process forward. So I'll stop there, turn it back to the chair, and see if there's questions.
Any questions for Michael?
Through the chair.
Go ahead.
So, Mike, what happens if their 218 does not pass? Are we out of Are we're not gonna get a payment or anything if we do that, or?
That's a great question.
I'm gonna be point blank.
You know, I don't know if I could turn to our attorney here, but who's also the attorney for Sbfca, but, you know, they wouldn't have the means to pay for these credits, is my understanding, and see if Scott has anything different.
Yeah, Sbfca has several revenue sources, but this assessment is essential for it providing its non-federal share. I think like every other public agency that's trying to raise money, if you don't succeed at first, try again. If the assessment didn't pass, Sbfca and Sbfca could decide whether it wanted to do a transfer betting on a future dollar amount. I'm not advocating that. I'm just saying that's
Right.
about the only option at that point, right?
The only reason why I'm asking is we just went through a 218, and I know how extremely hard it is.
Yep. Yeah, they are. They are. Seth, do you have anything to add to that?
You could say no.
Okay.
I have a quick question, and that brings up something for me. So, if it doesn't pass, when they go through the process again, do we have to go through all of this process over again? Or
No.
Okay.
No, we will, the majority of this process is perfecting credits through the Army Corps, so we'll have those credits.
So if it didn't pass and they do pass it a year later, we're ready to go.
Right.
Or in the meantime, I might sell to somebody else.
Or look to sell, yeah, there's other potential partners in the sale of our credits, so we would look to seek those.
Probably the best.
Scott or Michael, you can answer this. Isn't there an expiration date for our credits? They're only good for a certain amount of time. Is that correct?
There is, and then if you could go back 2 slides, Tara, I did incorporate in the first bullet there, right at the end. So Section 8383 of WRDA 2022 extended the credit transfer period out 5 years, so they're good until into 2028.
Okay.
Great question.
So if they get you to the end of 2028 and they don't sell to anybody else, can you re-up it and re-get a new set of credits or not?
Well, yeah, the idea, well, in my mind, would be working with the state to try to continue to get an extension to the ability to transfer those credits out.
Yeah, your credits technically don't expire. What expires is the authorized program that allows you to transfer them to a different basin.
Okay, you just have to redo the whole process again.
You have to get Congress to agree that it can be transferred to another basin after 2028. You could transfer it to the state tomorrow. My view has always been that dealing with the state is going to be impossible, and you do better to deal with another local agency. But if Sbfca doesn't produce the money and you're looking for another partner to sell to, the state would be a logical one to talk to.
Through the chair?
Yeah, go ahead.
If there's a market for these credits, why aren't we going out on the market to see who would pay us the most for them?
Yeah, the only people who can purchase it are other projects for which the state of California is also a partner, because you need to have a common partner for the buyer and the seller. Okay, so you can look at, and it has to be in the same watershed. So it's the Central Valley, and it has to be a project which needs credits. And there aren't a lot of those, right? So when you look at Sbfca, Sacramento Area Flood Control Agency, it developed so many credits in the Natomas Basin that it has everything it needs to move to all of its other basins. Marysville essentially is done, or they have the money to be done. They have enough credit from the Yuba Basin project. We don't need it anymore. I mean, we'd love to use it on another project, but we don't have core involvement in another project. So then you start looking around for federally authorized projects, and potentially Cache Creek, but it's not even authorized yet. And then Sbfca. Oh, and, excuse me, and West Sacramento. But West Sacramento believes it has enough credits from phase 1 that it did, that's the setback levy on Southport, to cover all of its local share on the other. So it's not like there aren't a ton of people out there right now.
Okay.
And I guess I should state it more directly. There's no one else out there right now.
Any other questions for Michael? Seeing none, thank you, Michael. That was very enlightening. And Okay, so now we move on to informational and possible approval actions. Presentation and file monthly financials. Zeth? Oh, he's already up there. He's ready to go.
Thank you very much. Let Tara pull up the presentation. Okay, this is our regular monthly financial report. So this covers the period ending January 31st of this year. Per the financial report that was provided in the packet from Yuba City, about $16.5 million in working capital. But when you take into consideration pending payments, accruals to date through, I think, just about the end of February, about $26.6 million. So quite a bit of revenue that we're waiting on and that has come in. So when you look at through January 31st in our operating fund, about $281,000, but we've received our full operating fund budget to date, $750,000. And then in terms of capital revenue, $323,000, but another $12.4 million in pending payments. So when you take the difference between the $750 and the $280, as well as the $12.4 million and the $323, that's about $12.6 million in pending. And we've kind of tried to make this a little bit easier to understand in terms of the total revenues and what's pending. So when you look at it through 131 on the left part of this slide, to date for the fiscal year, we've got about $13.174 million, but we've actually only received through January or accounted through January $603,000. So that's the total of $12.5 million. So there's quite a bit pending. We've broken it down to kind of show what's local revenues, assessments versus state payments. So from an assessment perspective, the $281,000 I mentioned has been received from Butte County and direct bill collections. The Sutter County apportionment came in last month. That was about $3.76 million. And so that's the local revenues. So that portion of the $12.57 million is associated with the Sutter County apportionment of our assessment revenues through January, or since January. So about $8.8 million of pending payments, and this long list on the right are all the payments that we've been working through with the state, and anything marked pending, we're responding to comments or waiting on payments associated with that. And so there's a lot associated in terms of number of payments with our small communities grant that flows through the county, and essentially the OWA project has a bunch of pending invoices too. So that gives us a sense of what we've got coming in. And, there's not a lot of project-related outlays. These are just revenues we're working on coming in and going to couple with fee revenues as well as reimbursements from other sources, and potentially in the future, the credit transfer payments that we're pulling together revenues to advance the Tudor Flood Risk Reduction Project and the Sutter Bypass East Levee Project. So that's the goal of getting all this cash back into the agency to advance future projects. So with respect to expenditures for the year, total about $3.9 million through the first 7-8 months of the year so far, primarily related to the OWA project and construction that completed last year. In terms of our financing, as I've mentioned in the past, we made our debt service payment for October, and then the April debt service payment has already been made. We've made that deposit with our fiscal agents, so our debt service has been paid through this year, and then starting the next payment will be in October 23. It'll be $3.8 million. With respect to our bonds, I wanted to mention that we finished up our audit last month. We presented that to the board. That gets appended to a report that we have to disclose to all the investors of Sutter Butte Flood Control Agency assessment revenue bonds, the 2 series that Michael mentioned. So we have to disseminate that. And this is basically the annual prospectus that you get if you own our bonds. And so it gets posted up to a website that's managed by the Municipal Securities Rulemaking Board, and that's where investors of bonds go to find out how their bonds are doing. With respect to financial activities moving forward, Again, continuing to process those payments and work with our granting agencies, submitting additional payments and looking for reimbursements, helping coordinate the efforts associated with our annual assessment revenues. We actually had our kickoff meeting with our assessment administrator earlier this morning, and we're helping facilitate the Fralifa assessment as well as part of that. So both agencies are using the same assessment administrator, and so we'll coordinate efforts on that. Working on the regional levy impact fee, we've been preparing documents and disseminated those to the member agencies that we've been coordinating with, and we'll be on the schedule to present to the city of Gridley on April 3rd. It's a Monday evening. And so that'll be the first agency we present to. And then I wanted to give the board a heads up of our annual budget process. Just as a reminder for some of the newer board members and a reminder for existing board members, we have a two-step process for our budget. We do a preliminary approval, and then at our next board meeting, we schedule a public hearing as part of that preliminary approval, and then our next board meeting, when we conduct that approval, that hearing, the board will consider approval of the budget. So we're looking at bringing the preliminary budget forward in May, and for preliminary approval, and then the hearing in June at the June board meeting for our fiscal year 23-24 budget. So that concludes my presentation. If there's any questions, happy to answer them. No, they do not.
If we sell them, the cash we get will show up on our balance sheet, right?
That's correct. And I think, the recognition of that revenue and that asset would be the execution of a transfer agreement. I've thought about that, and the MOU, the intent to negotiate, doesn't necessarily create an asset. But as soon as we were to agree to a payment, then that would show up on our balance sheet, our statement of net position, and then annually, as whatever the terms of that agreement are, when Sbfca if they were to make payments, that's when the revenue would be realized on our government statements.
So Sbfca wouldn't give us $20 million or how many million bucks right off the bat. They do it over time, a possible payment plan?
I'm a little conflicted here because my firm is advancing the assessment district that you're concerned about.
Yeah.
And
So that's to be negotiated.
yeah, that's
So that'll be-
terms. So I think anything associated with timing and value, I think is considered on that. I think it would be logical to assume that, though.
I didn't know if it was cash or installment sale, and it's just the strangest thing to me that we've got these things out here that we're not showing on a balance sheet or as an asset, yet when we sell them, it's immediately cash to us and on a balance sheet.
Well, you're still working. So there's two things. There's two things I think that need to be before you can even value them. Well, number one, we don't know how much credit the Corps would approve. That's number one. So we don't even know the dollar amount of the value. And then they may be of no value if there's no one you don't have the ability to utilize them yourself because you don't have projects that would otherwise.
They're kind of like a depreciated asset. We've got them and we don't know what they're worth.
Well, it's a potential asset that you have to work to create. That's what you're doing right now.
Seth, going to the question, though, of whether money would come in at once or later, Michael's right. That's something to be negotiated by the partners. But you could talk a little bit about, if the assessment passes, how Sbfca will have a combination of PAYGO and bond revenue.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, that's a piece that, is mechanical that I think you can explain so they'll understand some of the cash flow opportunities Sbfca would have, which would be the basis of a negotiation.
Yeah.
I don't want to get too far in the weeds.
Sure. So.
Don't make a huge big.
Well, to Scott's point, Sbfca's program, it's a $1.3 billion program based on the Corps' 2017 estimate, probably much higher today. But the implementation timeframe is over 10 years. So it's a bunch of small projects all mashed into one very large project. And so from a cash flow perspective, they would look to finance that over time through, as Scott mentioned, regular assessment revenues, the same as Sutter Butte did. We didn't need all the money up front. It was based upon projections of when we would let specific construction contract, for different reaches of levy. So we would look, when we optimize the financing plan, we look at, well, how much are we going to get on an annual basis? And then how much are we going to get from bond proceeds by dedicating some of those revenues to a financing? And then, if I'm only dedicating half of that revenue toward debt service, I've still got more pay-go revenues to go. So, Sbfca's program, we've helped optimize that financing plan so that it becomes the least annual burden to the property owner. And so they wouldn't have the resources to plunk down 20 million on credit that they couldn't use right away with the Corps. When you do a project with the Corps, you have cash obligations to pay. So you can't just use 100% credit. You have to put up some cash. In addition, you have LERD's obligations, which are cash obligations. So buying credits from Sutter Butte wouldn't serve the purpose of paying cash payments to the Corps or buying that right away in land acquisition. So it would be a timing of when could they utilize the credits as well.
It sort of answers my question.
Hopefully that wasn't too weedy. Okay.
Thank you, Todd. Any other questions for Zeph on that? Are you all done? I am. I'm sorry. Okay. No questions for Zeph. Okay. Thank you.
So thank you very much.
All right, moving on. Presentation and file of program updates. Michael.
Yes, all right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this is our last presentation today. So first of all, I want to talk about the weather forecast and coordination activities. So as we all know, another atmospheric river is headed our way starting tomorrow. We've gotten about 200% of our annual snowpack already sitting up in Tahoe and the central, the mountains up there. So this next storm, as we've all heard, is supposed to be a bit warmer than the previous storms. So there's going to be more rain up at higher elevations. So there's the concern for a massive snow melt if we were to get, more rain than what is predicted, warmer, that type of thing. So Chris and I, we've been in daily communications with the Yuba Water Agency staff, also with DWR on the operations of Orville Dam Reservoir and the New Bullets Bar, which New Bullets Bar sends water down the Yuba River. And obviously Orville comes down the Feather. So the recent news we've gotten is they're both starting to ramp up releases starting today. Orville is starting to release about 3,500 CFS through their Hyatt power plant. There's a potential that they may utilize their primary spillway starting on Friday, depending on what rains we receive Thursday and Friday, to create room for future flood releases or water coming down from the mountains. The same with New Bullets Bar. They're about right now today about 7,400 CFS being released into the Yuba, and what our discussions are right now is that's probably going to hold for a while, and then they're going to see how things go. But both reservoirs have considerable flood capacity space available to receive these flood waters. So I didn't want to be an alarmist. I just wanted the board to be aware that we're in constant communications with our partners, both on the state side and on the local side. I'll continue to update the board as I've done in the past couple of weeks, sending out information. I'm hoping everybody's receiving those emails. But we're constant eyes on what's happening, coordinating with obviously Levy District 1 and 9 and the state maintenance areas as the waters in the rivers rise. But right now we're showing the predictions are the Feather isn't supposed to get close to monitor stage except at the very lower end of our basin by the end of the week into the weekend, depending on the releases out of the reservoirs. So we'll continue to monitor activities of our partners and continue to update the board. And before I continue on, I want to stop there and see if there's any questions or comments about upcoming weather. All right. All right, continuing on. Feather River West Levee Project 1, this is the project we've constructed. We're closing everything out. Still working with our regulatory partners on the environmental mitigation. Just had a call with the Corps yesterday on our cultural resources mitigation. We're finalizing those mitigation documents. So we're in the process of finishing up that work. Also, the O&M manuals, those have been completed. The Corps approved them. The Central Valley Flood Protection Board will be issuing those manuals to the local maintaining agencies. And that should happen any day now, but I just pinged my contact there and I haven't gotten a response back, but those should be coming out very soon. Lastly, on the right-of-way transfer to the state, we've acquired the properties. We still got one outstanding acquisition that we're waiting on. It just needs to be signed off. It's already been approved. And then we'll be transferring all of these properties over to the state. So that process is underway, and it'll be completed this year. On Feather River West Levee Project 2, which is the lower 1.6 miles of the Feather, what we call the Tudor Flood Risk Reduction Project, we are in design on that project now. So we're coordinating with our design team weekly. We're coordinating with our environmental team on producing the Sbfca document for that project. The cultural resources consultations are going well with United Auburn. And what we just found out from our partner, the Central Valley Board, that what we do is we apply for an encroachment permit through the board, send in our 65% plans, and then they send all of that over to the Army Corps to start the 408 review process. Well, they've changed things a little bit on us, and we just found out last week that essentially they were saying you have to have a completed Sbfca document. And that was a big surprise to us. We hadn't done that in the past, so when we issued all of our 408s for the Feather River West Levee project, we did not have a completed Sbfca document. We were in process, so we were advancing both of those procedures at the same time. So and the reason for that is, from what we understand, is the Army Corps wants to know that the application that they receive has been fully vetted and the project isn't going to change. So if you have a completed Sbfca document, that's the assurance that, that project will be constructed as approved through the Sbfca document. So the compromise we negotiated with the Central Valley Board and the Corps is the Central Valley Board will be able to issue our 408 application at the time we release our public draft Sbfca document. So we lose about 6-8 weeks or so about 2 months of timing, because we've already submitted the application to the board in early January. So we were hoping that the application to the Corps, the 408 review, would have started in the end of January. Now it's going to start probably the end of this month, or actually in April. So that's when we anticipate releasing the public draft Sbfca document in early April. So that's a little bit of a hiccup into our schedule. So we're working on that, and we'll learn from that as we advance the Sutter Bypass project. But next month, I'm going to have Chris give you a presentation on this project and the Sutter Bypass so you can understand the schedules for both of those projects moving forward. So we'll get into a lot more detail on that next month. Next slide, please. So here's the Sutter Bypass project. So we just started design on that project. We received our $4 million grant from DWR. The design team is out gathering data now. The MHM was going to be out surveying. They've actually started their survey to do cross sections and alignment of the project and boundaries of the real estate rights that are out there. Obviously, the weather has impacted that process, so they'll be back out there hopefully next week when things dry out a little bit. But the good news is, that project is advancing. We're coordinating with DWR because the state is producing the Sbfca document for that project. So our team will submit all the information to the environmental team so that they can produce that Sbfca document. And we'll get into more detail next month on timing and schedule. On the Orville Wildlife Area, Robinson's Riffle project, We have not yet received our $1.1 million planning grant, but that's in process, and we should be receiving that within the next week or so. We are geared up to sign those documents through DocuSign. So we're starting to plan out that planning process now and bringing on our consultants to help move that project forward. So I have really good news, and Mr. Connolly, I wanted you to hear this, Supervisor Connolly. So we just on Monday received a $2.1 million grant from CDFW for the design and permitting of the OWA Robinson's Riffle project. So after we get through the planning process, we have the funding now to advance design and permitting. So that was great news. We had submitted that grant application in early January, and it quickly got approved, and we were just notified on Monday that we were successful. So excited to let the board know we received an additional round of funding for that project. Also, we are coordinating with CDFW and WCB on fully funding the boat ramp and campground project at the Thermalito Afterbay. That project in total is around $6.2 million. So the WCB is taking the approval of that grant to their board in May. CDFW is working on issuing the funds through their agency right around the same timing. So that project will kick off later this summer. So we're excited about all of those advancing up there in the Orville Wildlife area.
If I might add, I'd heard we're going to name that boat ramp the William Connolly boat ramp. Is that right? No. We're not?
No, that's combat fishing. That's a combat area there. Where's the ring?
Right.
You've never watched combat fishing, you need to go down there.
Is that right? Okay, will you take me down there and show me?
Yeah.
He might leave you there, Todd. Be very
Is
careful.
it crazy? Too many people letting their boats off at one time?
No, they drive the boat up and they throw lures at you. They cross the line and get the knife out and cut it.
Okay, I'm sorry.
All right, no worries.
Levity here. I'm sorry. We'll move on.
So the next item, our sediment removal. We're still seeking grant funding for sediment removal project, the phase 2 project that we're hoping to advance. We have applications into the WCB and CDFW. So, we have a lot of coordination with both of those agencies. They're fully aware of this project, our desire to complete the work that we started, and we're keeping our fingers crossed that we'll be successful there. And as soon as I hear something, I'll let the board know. On regional flood management planning, the phase 3 grant that's being administered by Trillia, that work is coming to conclusion very soon, like end of this month, early next. Most of the work will be completed. The grants will be exhausted. And then we'll be moving forward on our phase 4. So we're still waiting on the phase 4 grant, which Sbfca will be the administrator of. In the amount of $260,000. So I'm working on consultant team contracts now. We'll be issuing those later this month. And as soon as we receive our grant, we'll be able to advance forward on the work there. But essentially, as you can see what I listed here, this regional grant process has been helping us advance these important projects. So Sutter Bypass, Cherokee Canal Corridor Management Plan, the Orville Wildlife Area, seeking out all these grants that we're just starting to get successful on. These activities were funded by the state to help us advance all of these efforts. So very valuable and important work that has been fully funded by the state. So we're excited about that. Next slide, please. So this is a newer item. I talked about this a little bit last month. I presented to the city of Orville, actually Supervisor Connolly and I did, to talk about, we briefed them on the Orville Wildlife Area project, but then we also talked about their 1 mile stretch of levee that protects a portion of that city that is essentially in disrepair. It needs improvements. It can't be certified in the state that it's in. It's not part of the state plan of flood control, nor is it a federally authorized levy. So it's what we call an orphan levy. It's simply the city's levy for them to maintain and improve. The city doesn't have the means to handle that work right now. So they're looking to Sbfca to assist. So the city council has told their staff, proceed with consulting with Sbfca and potentially entering into some form of arrangement to allow Sbfca to come in and assist the city in that regard to repair that levee. So I'm still in fact-finding mode. So I'm coordinating with the city of Orville to determine what type of assistance they're seeking, how will that get paid for, how would we enter into some form of business arrangement to allow this agency to assist them. So there's a lot more questions right now that I'll be getting answers to, and then I'll bring it back to the board to make decisions upon. So right now I'm sort of in fact-finding mode. So I just wanted to let the board know.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, if we weren't able to pass this last assessment that we did to be able to create revenue and maintain our own levies, the state would have come in and taken it over, correct?
Yes, if the levy districts went defunct, they would turn it over to the state to maintain.
With this little stretch in Orville.
Well, ours are part of the state plan of flood control. So their levies are not right now. So that's the difference.
They're totally, believe it or not, they're not owned, because they're very early, like 1906, there was a major flood. By 1915, they shoved up a levee. 1930s, they added to it by dredging the river and just widened it. So there's no cement core. It is truly mind-boggling.
Yeah.
And it has boils, and if they don't fix it, it will be in a floodplain, sort of like the creek.
So just to let the board,
And Sbfca use money, we're just asking for directions so we can get the money to make the repairs, get it certified so Orville isn't in a floodplain.
that's exactly the point I was about to make, and Bill just put it there. They're not asking,
Coming to take
right, right.
Because of Sbfca's expertise in doing these type of projects.
Correct.
Yeah, and finding the funding, yep. Yep, and it's good that we work together.
Okay, great. So I'll bring back more information when I get it. Federal project, we've already talked about the federal project, so I won't get into that. FEMA remapping of Sutter County, that process is moving forward. Chris and his team are finalizing the package to be able to send off to FEMA. It's being delayed by the Army Corps' ability to get their contractor to submit as-built for the Cypress to Tudor project, so that's delaying things a bit. But we're anticipating this summer being able to submit a package to FEMA. Lastly, on the regional development impact fee process, coordinating with our member land use agencies to advance that work and to get development impact fees incorporated into the member agency packages, development packages, so that new development pays their fair share into the Sbfca program to continue to certify levies and make any type of minor repairs that are needed in the future to maintain that certification. So our next board meeting next month, I just wanted to highlight, like I said earlier, we'll bring back some more clarity on schedule and timing of everything for the Tudor Flood Risk Reduction Project and the Sutter Basin, Sutter Bypass Levee Repair Project. So with that said, Mr. Chairman, I'll turn it back to you to see if there's any questions.
Cool. Any questions for Michael? Seeing none, no public comment at the end? Seeing none, I move the meeting adjourned, and our next meeting is on April 12th. Thank you.